The case I'm about to tell you took place in the Kazakh Soviet Socialist Republic in the city of Alma-Ata. Alma-Ata, the capital of the Kazakh Republic at the time, sat quietly at the foot of the Alatau Mountains, a peaceful setting soon overshadowed by something far darker. What unfolded there shook the Soviet society to its core. Despite being classified as secret in a society where information was tightly controlled, rumors still leaked out. Whispers began to circulate that the perpetrator may have done something unthinkable, consumed parts of the victims. No one wanted to believe it, but the truth turned out to be far worse. Officially, crime was rare in Soviet cities. The press emphasized order, productivity, and socialist ideals. But in early 1979, that illusion began to crack. On January 25, 1979, in Almaty district, on a remote section of the Uzinagash-Maybulak road, near the village of Fabrichny, now Kargali, authorities found unrecognizable remains of a woman. The landscape, a frozen stretch between empty fields and low hills, offered no witnesses, only tire tracks in the snow and the wind scouring the icy pavement. Her identity was later confirmed by her parents, who had reported their 22-year-old daughter, Nadezhda Androniuk, missing since January 7. Because of how badly the body was damaged, investigators couldn't even determine the victim's gender at first. Only ribs and lower limbs had been recovered. The investigation launched immediately, following every lead: Nadezhda's ex-boyfriend and the religious group she attended. Under interrogation, the ex-boyfriend confessed, but his story was full of contradictions. It doesn't add up. He was never charged. Medical records showed he suffered from schizophrenia, and his confession was deemed false. At that time, religion in the Soviet Union was heavily suppressed. Still, underground groups persisted. Nadezhda was known to attend a Seventh-day Adventist congregation, which, while not illegal, was viewed with deep suspicion by the Soviet authorities. Authorities even planted an undercover agent, but no link to the crime emerged. With no strong evidence or credible witnesses, the case soon went cold. Then, on April 29, 1979, a horrifying emergency call came in from the village of Uzinagash. Around 2 a.m., neighbors reported screams from the Aksionov residence. When the investigators arrived, they discovered two women in their bed, each brutally stabbed. While searching the house, an officer heard a movement inside a wardrobe. Inside, a young girl was hiding, alive, shaken, and in shock. She was the daughter of one of the victims. Taken to the hospital and later interviewed, the girl recounted how a stranger had entered through a window, attacked her grandmother first, then her mother, and how she had managed to hide just in time. She even claimed the attacker drank blood from her mother's neck wound. Forensics linked these murders to the first case. Injury patterns and modus operandi suggested they were the work of the same person. Investigators formed a special task force, created a psychological profile, swept villages, blocked roads, and even deployed helicopters. But the perpetrator remained elusive. In the Soviet Union, criminal profiling was in its early stages, and due to strict censorship, serial killers were often denied as a phenomenon altogether. The field of behavioral analysis, now considered essential in tracking repeat offenders, had not yet been formally developed. Investigators relied largely on traditional methods: witness statements, physical evidence, and confessions. There was little room for psychological theories or patterns of behavior. This made investigations even more difficult. As a result, killers were able to operate in the shadows, not just because of their own cunning, but because the system itself was not prepared to see them. Another distressing call: a young woman was found dead, with her crying newborn beside her. The alarm was sounded across nearby districts, the village was locked down, and helicopters once again patrolled above. The situation escalated so severely that high-ranking officials from the Almaty police were summoned to the ministry in Kazakhstan, and urgent results were demanded. Despite these efforts, in early December 1980, another disappearance occurred at the high-altitude Medeo rink. Zoya Kashina vanished without a trace and was officially reported missing the next day. Search teams, police, and volunteers scoured the area, unaware she was being held about 40 kilometers away. At that point, she was still alive. Then, on the 12th of December 1979, a break came. That night, a terrified man burst into the police station. He told authorities how, the evening before, he and his friend had been invited for drinks by a stranger. Everything seemed normal until the host returned from another room carrying a woman's severed head. The two men fled and alerted the police. Officers rushed to the house. Even seasoned officers couldn't be prepared for what they saw. A man, completely unclothed and visibly stained with blood, opened the door with a vacant smile. What they found inside was beyond disturbing. The partially dismembered remains of a woman. It was later identified as Zoya. But before they could arrest this man, he managed to escape into the dark alleys of Fabrichny. A massive manhunt began. Acting on fresh leads, officers began questioning witnesses. Before long, they were able to identify the suspect. Once his close relatives were located, it didn't take long to determine where he might be hiding. Police traced him to a relative's home, where fresh nail heads were spotted on the floor. Investigators lifted the boards and found him hiding in a crawl space. The shadow now had a face and a name. Nikolai Jumagaliev, born in 1952 in Yuzhnagash. He was the only son in a family of 4 children and, by most accounts, grew up as a seemingly normal child. After finishing school, he graduated from a railway technical college, served in the army, and began working various jobs. He had a history of changing professions and moving cities. At one point, he was arrested for killing a fellow firefighter. Diagnosed with schizophrenia, he was committed, but released in under a year. During interrogation, Jumagaliev admitted not only to the killings, but to acts of cannibalism, a claim supported by the discovery of human remains in his refrigerator. He revealed how he cooked flesh in various ways, frying, stewing, even making dumplings. Over time, those close to Jumagaliev noticed a shift in his behavior. He became increasingly withdrawn and obsessed with unconventional ideas. He began reading esoteric literature and showed a growing interest in the occult. According to later accounts, he spoke about concepts of purity, higher purpose, and transformation. He believed he was chosen for something greater, that through his actions, he was evolving into something beyond human. This delusional belief in becoming a so-called superhuman began to shape not only how he saw the world, but how he justified his crimes. In his mind, he wasn't simply committing acts of violence. He was carrying out a kind of twisted mission, guided by forces only he could understand. He described his crimes as ritual sacrifice, aimed at cleansing the world of impure women, claiming divine guidance in selecting victims at random. He was connected to at least 9 deaths, though the actual total remains unknown. Declared criminally insane, Jumagaliev was sentenced to indefinite confinement in a secure psychiatric hospital. 8 years later, he escaped during a transfer to another institution and vanished. A nationwide search ensued. He sent a letter to his mother saying he was in Moscow, but he actually fled to the mountainous regions of Kyrgyzstan. When survival became too difficult, he returned to Kazakhstan, disguised as a stranger stealing livestock, only to be captured shortly after. To this day, Nikolai Jumagaliev remains in a psychiatric institution in the village of Akhtas. Here you can see the only photo of this hospital we managed to find in the internet. In the end, what remains is not just a record of one man's actions, but a trail of senseless brutality that defied logic, compassion, or any clear motive. These were acts of violence that seemed to serve no purpose, leaving behind only fear, grief, and unanswered questions. For the families of the victims, the damage was irreversible. For investigators, the case challenged everything they thought they understood about the human mind. And for society, It was a chilling reminder that even in times of strict order and control, horror can emerge, without warning, without reason, and without mercy.